Good evening. Welcome everyone to an episode of this cooking class that has been a long time coming. I'm very excited about this and I hope you are too, because tonight we're going to be talking about cashews, which I know does not sound like the most exciting thing in the world, but I promise you it can be if you do what we're going to talk about doing tonight. So to talk about cashews, we're going to make a very basic cashew sauce or cashew cream. And then we're going to kind of step it up with a couple of different variations. But what I'm showing you tonight is just kind of the tip of the iceberg. There's lots more that can go into your cashew cream than even what I'm about to show you. But I want to show you first of all the kind of cashews that we're working with, just in case there's any confusion. I'm going to tip this camera just a little bit so you guys can see everything that I'm doing here. So the cashews that we're working with are raw. Please understand that. This is not going to work if you buy the kind of roasted, salted, ready to snack sort of cashews. Not going to happen. They've got to be raw because the raw ones have a higher water content and they work a lot better. Also, you don't have to worry about how they're seasoned or how they've been cooked already. So always get the raw ones if you're going to do what we're talking about tonight. That being said, these raw ones were brought up to a boil and left there for a couple of minutes, and then I turned the heat off and covered them and let them stand for about an hour and a half to 2 hours. You don't have to do that to make what we're making tonight, but I think it does speed up the blending process. Let me scoot this forward a little bit so everybody can see how this works in the blender. So let's do that. What we're going to make tonight is a sort of cashew Alfredo sauce, and that's going to go on top of some spiralized sweet potatoes, what I like to call sweet patoodles, because they're kind of like noodles made out of sweet potatoes. Very exciting. And then we're also going to make some nachos with the cashew cream sort of transformed into a nacho cheese sauce. So all of this is very simple, but it does take a little bit of technique. The nachos are also going to be topped with some spicy, very flavorful black beans. And I want to get those started right now so they can soak up as much flavor as possible. So over here on the stove, and I know that some of you can't see this, so let me angle my camera just a little bit so that some of you folks at home can see a little bit better. Over here, I've got my cast iron pan, and I've got it at medium low because I don't want this stuff to burn. So what I've got here are some diced onions and jalapenos. That's going to go in here. All that good stuff out. We do want that. So our onions, spread those out on the bottom of our jalapenos. And also some black beans. Now, you might not be surprised to know that these black beans came from the freezer. This is, in fact, one of those black beans that came from the batch that we cooked 2 weeks ago and stored away in our freezer. So I didn't have to worry about it. I knew that I had a nice keeping helping of black beans that I could cook up for tonight's nachos. So I'm going to spread all of that out in there. I'm going to let that cook down a little bit with the lid on. I'm going to raise the heat just a little bit. This burner, okay, so this is my favorite burner. This is the right front burner. I think that's everybody's favorite burner. This one, I'm sorry, burner, but you come in second. It's too bad, but that's just the way it is. So it doesn't heat up quite as thoroughly as this burner right here. This is the high output burner, apparently. So this one doesn't get quite as hot. So I'm just going to let that sit and do its thing over there. And in the meantime, let's talk about our cashew cream. So cashews will blend really nicely, but you have to, hopefully what you have is a high power blender. Let me turn this around again so that everybody can see the blender that I'm dealing with here. So with this kind of blender, I love this blender. It does a wonderful job. It is very high powered, but it's always suggested that you put your liquid things in first. So this is about 2 cups of soaked cashews. As I said, you don't have to soak them, but I do think it tends to speed up the process and improve the texture if you do. So boiled for about a minute or so, and then left with the lid on for a little while, about an hour and a half or so, and then drain. And I'm going to put another about a half a cup of water. All the liquid goes in first, so about half a cup of water, and then lemons, which about 2 tablespoons worth of lemon juice. And I know that sounds strange when we're talking about not a citrusy sauce, but if you want it to taste sort of cheesy and dairy-like, you need that tang, that flavor in there. And that's what the lemon juice provides. It's not a dominant flavor, but it does kind of give you the sensation when you're eating it and tasting it that you would come to expect from cheese or dairy or some other kind of dairy product. So a little bit of lemon. I've got 3 cloves of garlic here because all of the sauces that we're making are going to rely not totally on garlic, but the flavor is going to be improved by the garlic. And then, like I said, about 2 cups dry of cashews. They did expand a little bit when we let them boil and soak. Before I do that, I'm also going to, for our sweet potato dish, we want some roasted vegetables. These are very thinly sliced carrots and some snow peas and some asparagus. It's going to cook pretty quickly, but that's fine because the rest of this comes together really quickly too. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in our 350-degree oven and let those roast up and do their thing while this is blending. So in here, we have the garlic, the lemon juice, about 1/2 cup of water, our 2 cups of soaked cashews. And before we add anything else to it, we're going to let it blend for a little while. And when I say a little while, I do mean it's going to take a little bit of time to make this happen. So it's on the lowest setting. And I'm going to turn it on. Just so they start getting very well acquainted with each other, right? So we're not going to go crazy. And I can see already, you're not going to be able to see this process very well, I don't think. But I can see already it's starting to stick to the sides because there's not quite enough liquid. So what I'm going to try first is cranking up the speed a little bit. Okay. So even cranking up the speed, that helps. But there's still not quite enough liquid. Now, I don't want this to be watery. So I'm going to scrape down the sides to get all of the solids off of the sides that I can. And I'm going to add a little bit more liquid, but I'm not going to add water. The liquid I'm going to add is some plant-based milk, in this case, oat milk. That's pretty much all I use. And I don't really have a measurement. I'm just putting a splash or 2 in there so that it blends up a little bit more smoothly. And it smells really good already. I mean, garlic, what can go wrong? So let's crank it up again. Always start off on low. And now it's starting to look much, much better. So it's still very thick, which is what we want, but it's also not clumping up the way that it did when there wasn't enough liquid in there. So I'm going to go ahead and turn up the speed. And right now, it looks just about perfect because we want it to be very thick. It's our base sauce, so we don't want it to be runny, right? Okay. I'm going to let that keep going for a few minutes because we want it to be very, very smooth. In the meantime, let's check on our beans and our onions and jalapenos and see how those are coming along. So the black beans and the onions and the jalapenos are simmering really beautifully. I'm just stirring them and spreading them out evenly across the bottom so that they cook evenly. And the next thing that I'm going to add to my black beans and my onions and my jalapenos, a little bit of the chipotle pepper, okay? Because that's going to give it some spice and also really nice smokiness, and that's going to taste really good on top of our nachos, okay? So let's do that. And remember, with chipotle, a little goes a long way. It is very, very spicy. So even me, even I, am just using a little bit. let's see how our consistency is coming along. It looks so smooth and so beautiful. Let's take just a little tiny bit. Because what we don't want is for it to be grainy. That totally throws off. If the texture is off, then it's going to throw off the flavor even just subconsciously, and that's not what we want. So it looks absolutely silky smooth. Let me show this to you. It looks almost like whipped ricotta or mascarpone cheese, which is what we want. We want it to look very, very smooth, but we want it to feel really smooth also. Perfectly smooth. Absolutely, perfectly beautiful. And let's break down the sides one more time. And now I'm going to start adding a little bit of flavoring that's going to be universal to both the nacho cheese that we're going to make and the sort of Alfredo sauce that we're going to make. It doesn't have far to go to hit that sort of Alfredo-y flavor, but we do want it to have a cheesy, more of a cheesy effect. So what we're going to add is some nutritional yeast. That's going to give it a deeper, richer color, and it's also going to give it kind of a cheesy flavor. That's one of the great benefits of nutritional yeast. So I'm putting in about a quarter of a cup to start. We'll see how it does. And I'm going to add a little bit of salt. Probably about a teaspoon. Okay. And then I'm going to whip that up again one more time. Starting slowly. And the other thing I'm going to do is start this big pan. This is going to be the pan in which we're going to cook our sweet potatoes. So these are these spiralized sweet potatoes, and I want them to be nice and soft like pasta, but I don't want them to be soggy. So I've got just a little bit of water in the bottom of this great big pan. For those of you, one of these cameras that I'm working with covers a larger area than the others. So this is a very large saute pan. And I'm going to wait until the water comes to a boil, very little, just enough to cover the bottom. Now I'm going to throw in these spiralized sweet potatoes and let them cook gently, not so that they get soggy, and I also don't want them to burn. I want them to be just right, like al dente noodles. That's kind of what we're going for, but with sweet potatoes. It's really not that hard, I promise. And in the meantime, our beans and onions and jalapenos are coming along just beautifully. You'll notice that I haven't salted them yet. I generally don't until the very end. For one thing, the beans were cooked with salt, and so they already have some salt in them. The other thing is, you never know how much it's going to reduce. And if you put too much salt in it at the beginning, it's going to be much too salty at the end. What I am going to do is reduce the heat so that none of it burns. A lot of the moisture that was originally in there has cooked out, and I don't want it to burn. So at the end, I'm going to add some salt. I'm also going to add some cumin for kind of a more southwesterny Mexican food sort of flavor. You can also use that pecan taco meat that I like to use on top of nachos. I think that's stellar. But black beans are obviously very rich in protein, fiber, nutrients, etc. So we're going to use those today. Let's mix in this nutritional yeast and salt. Slowly at first, so it doesn't spatter all over everything. And then I'm increasing the speed. I can tell already just by looking at it that it's going to need more nutritional yeast to really give it that earthy, cheesy flavor. So I'm going to add about another quarter cup, so a half cup so far total, and that should probably just about do it. So let's see. I wish you could see the consistency of this sauce. It is so beautiful. All right, let's see how the flavor is. And that is what we're looking for. It is a little tiny bit of sweetness because cashews have some sweetness to them, but it is not overwhelming. Really good garlic flavor, a little bit of tartness from the lemon, but no real lemon flavor at all. And now, since we've added the salt and the nutritional yeast, it tastes very Parmesan-y and very savory. So that's exactly what we're looking for. This water in this pan is starting to come to a simmer. I'm going to go ahead and add my sweet potatoes, spreading them out on the bottom about as much as I can without getting any more excess water in there. Okay. Crank up the heat a little bit. And I'm going to put the lid on. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check on my vegetables. You remember we have some vegetables floating around in here, and I don't want them to overcook. So let's take a look at my roasted vegetables. And if the time is right, oh yes. All right, so these are almost exactly where we want them to be. See how bright they are? We've got one more addition to make, and this really is something that you don't do until about the last minute. I have some raw spinach here to add to the vegetables. Love the way spinach, a little bit of roasted spinach tastes in pasta. So I'm just scattering this raw spinach, keeping in mind it will shrink drastically when it cooks. So a little bit of spinach over the top of those roasted vegetables, a little bit of salt to season them, keeping in mind that the vegetables that are on the pan already have been seasoned previously. I just want to make sure the spinach gets its due. And then back into that 350-degree oven, because that spinach sitting on top like that is going to get a little bit crispy and very flavorful, which is exactly what we want. All right. So we have our base Alfredo sauce right here. And what we're going to do is turn this off so I don't make any mistakes. And we're going to put about half of this aside because this is right where we want it to be for these sweet potato noodles that we're making, right? So let's get some of that out. That's about enough. And if, like I said, infinite variety is available when you have this base sauce. And if you want to keep it extremely neutral, don't even put the garlic in. And then you can do all kinds of other things to it. You can put this on pizza, although, I mean, why wouldn't you put garlic on it, quite frankly? But for savory things, why wouldn't you put garlic on it, okay? So you can put it on pizza. I have. It's absolutely delightful, especially with roasted garlic. You can mix it with a little bit of tomato sauce and make sort of like a rosy cream pasta sauce with that. All right. So this is almost exactly where we want it to be. It's soft, but it's not falling apart or limp. So I actually let the lid come off for a little bit on these sweet potato noodles just to dry them out a tiny little bit. Okay. And let's check on our black beans and onions and jalapenos. They look just perfect. So here is when I'm going to turn the heat off of my black beans and onions and jalapenos. Oh my goodness, it's a new bottle of cumin. I've got to open a whole thing. Luckily that was easy. Okay. Sprinkle on a little bit of cumin because I just love that flavor. A little bit of that. And healthy sprinkling of salt. And that is our bean nacho topping. And as I said, you can use that pecan taco meat that we've made before. If you're not going meat-free, but you want to try dairy-free cheese, you could put, I guess, taco meat on top of your nachos or something else that you like. Keep that warm, but the heat is turned off. So almost all of the water has steamed off of the bottom of that sweet potato pasta, which is good because that's what I want. But the next thing I'm going to do is turn that oven off. Oh, beautiful. So our spinach is still nice and beautiful and bright, but it's gotten a little bit crispy around the edges. This is so beautiful and so healthy. I cannot wait to eat it, and I cannot wait for you all to try it. Right into the pot We're into this pan. I'm going to try to heat down a little bit since all that water is gone. Don't let any of it burn. I'm telling you, it's just right where it is. I can just turn the whole thing off, as a matter of fact. So let's add all of these beautiful roasted vegetables to our sweet potato noodles, right? Okay. So we've got this gorgeous, very vivid, bright, beautiful pan of vegetables, and to that, we're going to add this cashew cream. Let me move this pan over so you guys can really see what I'm doing here. Okay. All right. So here we have our cashew cream. We've got our sweet potato noodles with snow peas and roasted asparagus and roasted carrots and that slightly roasted spinach. Just going to dump all of this beautiful, rich, garlicky, creamy cashew sauce right into that and mix it. This is so wonderful. Oh, I cannot wait for you guys to try this at home. You're going to love it. And by the way, this sauce works just as well on regular pasta as it does on the noodles that you make with other vegetables like zucchini or sweet potatoes or something like that. I had a gargantuan sweet potato from my produce box last week. And the first time I tried to make this cashew garlic sauce was with sweet potatoes. And it turned out so well that I wanted to share it with all of you. Plus, it helped me get rid of that great big sweet potato. So I'm going to put a nice, big, very colorful serving of that. I like my pasta spicy. So I'm going to add some crushed red pepper to the top just for a little bit of zhuzh on there. And let's get a fork. So let me show you what we're dealing with here. And it took us 20 minutes, not counting the soaking time for the cashews. But here we have those sweet potato noodles done in a spiralizer, some roasted carrots, snow peas, asparagus, and that spinach added at kind of the last minute. And then this garlic cashew Alfredo. I took too big a mouthful, as usual, but this really is spectacular. It is so good for you. It's so delightful. The cashews are a little high in fat, but they're not the bad kind of fat. This is the kind of fat that if you're going to have fat in your life, this is what you want. And it is so deeply flavorful because of the sweet potato noodles, the garlic in the sauce, and those really delightful concentrated roasted vegetables. I know it's rude to stand here and eat in front of you, but it's so good that I don't want to stop. Okay, I'll stop. Anyway, suffice it to say, it's really good. I'm going to set that back on the stove, and let's work with the second part of our garlic cream sauce, okay? Because this is how we're going to transform it into nacho cheese sauce. So if you remember, the base sauce is the cashews, the lemon juice, a little bit of water, a little bit of plant-based milk, nutritional yeast. What we're going to do to make it cheesier and spicier, first of all, we're going to add some hot sauce. This is just your basic, same kind of sauce you would use on the wings. Now, why are we shaking it out like that? We don't need to do that. There we go. It's going to give it a much richer color, and it's also going to really accent the cheesy flavors of it. We're going to add more nutritional yeast because we really do want a pronounced cheesy flavor. And we're going to add a little bit of smoked paprika, because that's really going to enhance the flavor as well. And we do want it to be a little thinner than the sauce that we put on that pasta, the sweet potatoes, because we're going to be kind of drizzling it on top of these nacho chips and black beans that we've made. So let's try it there and see how the texture is. Keeping in mind, we don't have to beat it too hard because it's already very soft, just enough to incorporate the ingredients. And I can tell already, as I usually can, just by looking at it, that it's going to need a little more something. The texture, the consistency is about right. It's thick, but pourable, which is what you want. You want the texture to be a little bit like Cheese Whiz, okay? But not Cheese Whiz, because that's gross. And until I taste it, I can't be 100% sure of what we need more of. So let me do that. Ooh. Ooh, that's good. Wow. See, taste-wise, looks are deceiving because it might not need anything. I would add salt, but I'm going to hold off on doing that, and I'll tell you why. The reason is because I want to get this warm. I want it to be nice and warm so that it pours over the top and is really more like, nacho cheese than cold cheese. So I'm going to get some of it, see how nicely that pours. A little different from the mother sauce that we made, in that really was too thick to be poured. But when it hit those hot sweet potato noodles and the other vegetables, it softened up and became really nice texture-wise. So we didn't want that to be too thin. This, we're just going to pour right over something. So we don't want it to be too thick. I'm going to add just a handful of this shredded plant-based cheese because I do want it to be a little bit gooey and goopy. So I'm going to incorporate that. And that's why I'm not adding any salt yet. Cheese, even plant-based cheese, tends to be quite salty. So I don't want it to be over salted. So I'm going to wait and see what happens when we heat this up and that plant-based cheese gets melted. So let's do 30 seconds on that. And in the meantime, I'm going to set my oven to broil. Okay. This side of the way so you can see. And I have here, now, if you're making this for a family, you want a cookie sheet, not just a little 8x8 pan here. But since it's really just kind of a sample platter, I didn't want to go crazy. I mean, I do, but I eat it all. Nobody wants that. I don't care how healthy it is. If you're eating all of it, it's probably not going to be a good idea. So the black beans and jalapenos and onions with the flavorings, the cumin and the salt and the chipotles that we put in there. Let's double check, make sure it's salty enough. Very tasty. So I'm just going to scatter the black beans and the onions and the jalapenos on top of the corn chips that I have here. Okay. So corn chips are not the healthiest things in the world, but they do have some fiber. So they got that going on for them. And we're adding the black beans and the vegetables that were cooked with them. So that's not terrible. And the cashew cream, while again, fatty, not the healthiest thing in the world, but by far is not the worst thing you could be doing with yourself in the realm of food by a long shot. So try not to worry about it too much. All right. So I think this will probably have to get heated up just a little bit more. Like I said, I really do want the plant-based cheese in here to give it a little bit of gooey stretchiness like you would expect from like an animal-based cheese. I've had really good luck with the Miyoko's brand so far, with their butter and with their cheese. I haven't tried their other stuff, but the shredded cheese is just fantastic. And the sliced cheese is really good on sandwiches too. I did try it in a grilled cheese the other day. It tasted good, but that's going to be something that I'm just going to have to miss and do without, I think, because I have not yet found a sliced plant-based cheese that does a grilled cheese so that, you know, like when you pull the slices apart, it just like goos everywhere and has that, sorry, but Oh, it's too bad. It's too bad. But it's not the end of the world not to eat grilled cheese sandwiches anymore. All right. So let's put this in for another few seconds. In the meantime, I've got all this good stuff left over. So waste not, want not. I can always make another batch of nachos, or I could probably do enchiladas, or I could make a casserole with this. Apparently today is National Tamale Day. I didn't really know that, and making tamales is a little bit out of my pay grade. And this kind of cheese doesn't really go with tamales anyway. But back to my original point, waste not, want not. This stuff is so good. And cashews can be a little bit pricey, but you can find them at some grocery stores in bulk, and that might bring the price down. And then you can also look for them online, and you might be able to find a better price that way. You will be amazed if you try this at home. I promise you. It really is quite something what greater minds than mine have been able to think up. And I'm standing on the shoulders of plant-based giants here, everybody. None of this, well, some of it, but most of it I have not come up with on my own. So let's get out our new improved nacho nut cheese. Okay, that's more like it. Much more. Okay. So it's a little thin, or a little thick. It's also very hot. So I'm going to kind of hold it very firmly with one hand, stir the heck out of it with the other. Okay. And since it is so thick, I am going to go ahead and add just a splash of plant-based milk to it. And very carefully so that it does not go all over me and all over my cutting board and cooking surface. Just incorporate that plant-based milk. So we've gotten back to that horrible, thinner texture that we had before we added all of that plant-based cheese to it. That will thicken it up. So if you want to do this on the front end and just make a slightly thinner base sauce before you add the plant-based cheese, that's fine too. But it really is right at about a Cheese Whiz consistency. And it does have that kind of stretchy, melty cheese quality that I was hoping for. So we're just going to spread this on top of the black beans. It's getting all over my pot holder. Oh well. I'll have a delicious pot holder. What can I say? Not skimping. We want lots of goopy cheese, just the same way we want lots of goopy cheese on our non-plant-based nachos. I promise you, we're going to want lots of goopy cheese on our plant-based one. So I'm just kind of spreading this out, and the chips on here are in more or less a single layer. I mean, some of them are overlapping, but we want maximum coverage on all of the chips of all of the toppings that are going on here. And so I tried to make it as much of a single layer of those chips on the bottom as I can. Okay, so here we have our delightful, oh man, yes, okay. So that's what it looks like. Remember that I put my oven on broil. So I'm just going to slide this under the broiler only as long as it takes me to slice up, or to dice up, I should say, a little bit of tomato right here. And you'll notice that for a tomato, there are two things that I absolutely must have a serrated knife for: tomatoes and bread. Everything else I can probably make do with a non-serrated knife, but tomatoes and bread, you better believe I gotta have a serrated one. Okay, so I'm just going to dice this up very simply. A few seeds, don't care. If I had been able to find any ripe avocados in the store today, I would have made some guacamole, because that sure is good at any point in time with just about any food. They didn't have any ripe ones, so no guacamole tonight, boys and girls, alas. But they did have decent tomatoes. I mean, as decent as a tomato can be in March. So we'll put some tomatoes right here. Okay. We don't want to scorch that. We just want the nachos to get a little bit toasty. So we're going to let those get a little bit toasty in there. Scoot all of this over so we have lots of room. And by the way, that cheese is good and spicy too. It's wonderful. Okay. And the other thing I want to make sure we have handy are some pickled jalapenos, because I gotta have those on top of my nachos. Turn that off. Grab a pot holder that is not covered with plant-based cheese. Perfect. Oh, yes. So you can see it's gotten very nice and toasty. So I'm just going to sprinkle that with this freshly diced tomato. And then I'm going to sprinkle that with our pickled sliced jalapeno. Okay. And let's have the moment of truth. Let me find a good one here that's kind of buried underneath. Ooh, they're hot. I hate to use a fork for nachos. That seems so weird, but just the same. They, like I said, they're very hot, especially when you're getting one from the bottom. So look at this. Look at this beautiful. Wow. So here, what you've got is a nicely toasted chip with that goopy, delicious, plant-based cashew nacho cheese and some of the black beans on there. Stellar. So these are just two of the many things that you can make when you're working with that cashew cream. We started with this very thick, a little bit neutral. I mean, you could taste the garlic in it, and you had a little bit of the tanginess. Oh, look at that. A little bit of the tanginess from the lemon juice, although you would never identify it as being from lemon juice. But from that, we just added just a few things to make it sort of an Alfredo-y type sauce for our sweet potato noodles. And then we added a little bit more to it to make this wonderful, rich nacho cheese sauce. And as I said, you can also put it on pizza. You can add some tomatoes to it and make it this nice rosy tomato cream sauce if you want to. You could probably add some basil to it and make it sort of a cashew cream pesto sauce. It's a great base recipe. And I know that if you add more lemon juice and salt to it, you have something that tastes a little bit like sour cream. So as long as you make it nice and smooth, the reason that it blended up so smoothly, so quickly tonight is because I did bring it to a boil, the raw cashews to a boil with some water, and then let them sit there and soak for a little while. But if you don't have time to do that, you can let it run for 15 minutes or so in the blender and still come out with a very smooth and soft, fluffy product like we did tonight. That's it. So look up cashew cream. Now that you know how to make the basic cashew cream, look up all the amazing things that you can do with it once you have that base recipe prepared, and you will be amazed. I hope you get the chance to try this at home, especially the noodles with the kind of cashew Alfredo sauce. It's so simple, but it is so delicious, and you can eat it knowing that you are really just filling your body with some great nutrients and good protein and all these wonderful fats that you can't get from animal fats. I hope you are able to try all of these. And I hope that you are able to join me, not next week. Most of you know my primary gig is that of a priest in the Episcopal Church. And next week, being Holy Week, is going to be a little tight for me. So we're not going to have the cooking class next week. We may not have it the week after next, because that's after Easter, and who knows how I'll be feeling. But you know what? We might. So definitely not next week, but keep your eyes open, because if not the week after that, then certainly the week after that. But you will know, because I will tell you all about it. In the meantime, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, remember that you were created by love for love. So please go out and be love in the rest of the world.
Good night, everybody, and thank you.